Our speaker is Bartlomiej Kowalczyk from the University of Liverpool, United Kingdom. Today, he presents his talk on the topic, The Intentionality of the Action of Love in Bridget Jones's Diary and Pride and Prejudice, a comparative study based on corpus analysis.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to my presentation on the intentionality of love, a comparative linguistic study based on Bridget Jones's Diary and Pride and Prejudice corpora. My name is Bartlomiej Kowalczyk, and I am a PhD student in the Department of English at the University of Liverpool. Today, thanks to the tools of corpus linguistics, we can take a closer look at how language shapes our understanding of love in different cultural and literary contexts. The aim of my presentation is to compare the intentionality of love in two different sources, the Bridget Jones's Diary corpus and the novel Pride and Prejudice, which are classic examples of English literature. Using collocational analysis and semantic analysis, I will try to show how different texts and cultural contexts influence our perception of the intentionality of love. Before I go into details of the analysis proper, I would like to briefly discuss the research methodology that was used to conduct this study. First of all, let me discuss briefly the corpora. The first corpus, Bridget Jones's Diary, a novel written by Helen Fielding, as a comparative material is extremely interesting as it allows for an examination of the evolution of the representation of love in contemporary literature. In contrast to the classic romance of Jane Austen, Bridget Jones's Diary presents a more realistic and humorous picture of a modern woman searching for love. An analysis of the collocations of the word love in Bridget Jones's Diary reveals how love is presented as a complex mix of desire, uncertainty, humor, and everyday problems. Pride and Prejudice. The choice of this novel as a comparative material is justified by its status as an iconic work in which themes of love play a key role. An analysis of the collocations of the word love in Pride and Prejudice reveals ways of expressing and conceptualizing love specific to this context. In the presentation, I rely on the analysis of collocations, the occurrence of specific words, verbs in close proximity to the word love, and on the semantic interpretation of these collocations to understand what actions are the most often associated with love in both analyzed sources. As a justification of why the actions or verbs were chosen is the concept of the acting person developed by Karol Wojtyła in his famous book, The Acting Person or Person and Act. And the concept of intentionality in this analysis should be interpreted as viewed by Ingarten, on which I will elaborate a bit more shortly. Now let's proceed to defining the concept of intentionality and next the concept of intentionality of love. Now, first of all, intentionality is a really complex concept, both from a philosophical and linguistic perspectives. And intentionality can be defined in English as an abstract noun describing a particular state, a way of being. In English, suffix ity added to the adjective indicates states, properties, qualities of an object described by the adjective. Therefore, intentionality is a way of being, a state, a property, or a quality of an object that is described as intentional with regards to its particular relationship to an intention. However, a Polish philosopher, Roman Ingarten, introduces two different types of intentionality. Intencyjność is an entity which includes an intention in itself. It can be seen as an act of consciousness. On the other hand, intentionalność is what is created by such acts. It is the object of the act. Therefore, a problem occurs with regards to English lexis, as currently it does not really represent, there aren't really two different representations of these two separate terms introduced by Ingarten. Hence, for the purposes of this analysis, I would like to refer to Polish word intencyjność as intentionality A and the Polish word intencjonalność as intentionality B. This leads us to making an attempt at defining the concept of intentionality of love, which I see as intentionality B and love generally and widely understood. And love is created by acts of consciousness. In combination with the concept of the acting person, where Wojtyła tries to prove that the actions reveal the true notion of the person, I came with an idea that the subject of the study would focus on the verb love and actions, other collocating verbs with the verb love, which ought to reveal its true nature. Before we proceed to looking at particular examples from the analysis, let me introduce you to how the graphs should be understood. So this frequency graph shows us an interesting relationship between the verb love and other verbs in the analyzed text corpus. The x-axis shows individual verbs, and the y-axis shows their frequency in 2 dimensions. Score, an indicator of the strength of the association, and frequency, which is seen as an absolute frequency. The second type of graph is a bubble chart. And according to Sketch Engine, the bubble chart depicts information about frequency of collocates and the similarity in meaning score in respect to the subject of this investigation being the lemma verb love, which is located in the center of the chart. The size of the circles around the center word, provides information about frequency of the occurring collocates in the corpus. It has the bigger the circle, the more frequent a collocating word with the center word is in the corpus. The distance from the center word refers to the similarity score, which means that the closer a word collocate is to the center word, the more similar it is to the center word in a particular corpus. Now let me move on to depicting the results of the analysis. Firstly, let's start with the Bridget Jones diary and the frequency of verb collocates with the verb love. Some key observations are: most frequent collocations are ask, tell, want, and like, which are the most frequently used collocations in the corpus. This suggests that in the text, love may often be associated with questions, confessions, desires, and sympathy. Moreover, the words around love indicate the different contexts in which it can be used. We can talk about love as desire, want, an action, take, or an emotional state, feel. The relationship between score and frequency. Although the relationship is not linear, it can be seen that higher score values often correspond to higher frequency of occurrence. This suggests that stronger relationships between verbs are more frequently observed. Now let's discuss the similarity in meaning of verb collocates with the verb to love in Bridget Jones's diary. The key observations and findings here are related to a multidimensionality of the concept of love. Also, it reveals that love has an active nature. Moreover, as mentioned before as well, an emotional dimension is revealed through the use of such verbs as want and like. We can also infer from this chart that verbs like see, find, mean suggest that love is associated with the process of getting to know oneself and others, with discovering the meaning of life. And the last but not least observation is related to interpersonal relationships. Verbs such as meet, ask, tell indicate the importance of love in the context of social relationships. Based on the semantic grid, we can now draw the following conclusions about the intentionality of love in Bridget Jones's diary. Love is not just a passive state, but involves active engagement, giving and receiving. Love is a dynamic process that involves learning, communicating, and change. And the intentionality of love also manifests itself through presupposition of the existence of another person with whom it is shared. Love gives life meaning and purpose. Let's move on to the second corpus, Pride and Prejudice. And from the frequency chart, we can infer that the most frequent collocations with the verb love are verbs suppose, like, wish, and ask, which suggests that the characters in the novel often wondered about, expressed, desired, and asked about love. It also reveals its emotional nature through the verbs like wish, hope, and fear, which appear in combination with love, which emphasizes the emotional dimension of the concept of love in the novel. What is interesting is that the verbs have different functions in the context of love. So some express desire, others describe beliefs, and still others concern social interactions. The last but not least observation here is that although love is usually associated with positive emotions, The graph also shows the occurrence of verbs with negative combinations like hate, suggesting that love can also be a source of suffering and conflict. Let's now have a closer look at similarity in meaning of verbs collocating with to love in Pride and Prejudice. The key observations are: love is a multidimensional concept. The grid shows that love is not a one-dimensional concept, but is associated with a wide range of emotions, actions, and mental states. Emotional words dominate, like wish, hope, hate, and admire. This emphasizes that love is primarily an emotional experience. Words like ask, tell, and promise suggest that love is a social phenomenon that requires interaction with other people. The presence of both positive, love, like, admire, and negative, hate, emotions indicates the ambivalent nature of love, which can be a source of both happiness and suffering. Words and their combinations reflect cultural and social conventions related to expressing love at that time when the novel was written. Let's now have a look how the concept of intentionality of love is more depicted in Pride and Prejudice. It can be interpreted as a couple of different concepts. Firstly, the desire for closeness. Also, the need for acceptance. Thirdly, the verbs like fear and hate could indicate a fear of losing a loved one or being rejected. Therefore, it can be interpreted as fear of loss. The last but not least is the need for self-expression. Tell, express suggests that love often requires expressing, communicating, and sharing one's feelings with others, which actually introduces a form of dialogue. Now, in summary, the comparative analysis of the intentionality of love in Bridget Jones's Diary and Pride and Prejudice reveals both similarities and significant differences. In both cases, love is seen as multidimensional, emotional, and related to social interactions. In both Fielding's and Austen's novels, the intentionality of love manifests itself through actions, not only a feeling but also a relationship with another person. The differences in the Bridget Jones's Diary, there is a greater emphasis on active action and giving meaning. The intentionality of love manifests itself through something we do, something that develops, and something that gives meaning to our lives, which is not really present in Pride and Prejudice. Let me quickly discuss some of the conclusions. And therefore, but since the intentionality of love refers to actions, emotions, and states of mind related to love, the key aspects of love intentionality can be inferred from the source analysis. It's the intentionality of love is related to some form of activity. It's also seen as a process, a relationship, and something that gives meaning. We can also infer from the analysis that the intentionality of love is related to emotions and the desire for closeness. Moreover, the need for acceptance and a fear of loss are also present. We can also say that love requires expressing, communicating, and sharing one's feelings with others. Therefore, this analysis reveals that the intentionality of love can be perceived differently depending on the cultural and literary contexts. Reference list. Thank you very much for your participation. Please contact me if you've got any questions or suggestions on how this analysis could be improved. Thank you very much.